In a small village nestled at the edge of the Venezuelan llanos, Rosal, a curious 17-year-old, lived with her abuela, Doña Marta. On the Day of the Dead, the villagers gathered to honor their ancestors. But as the festivities waned and the candles burned low, Rosa overheard a group of boys daring each other to summon El Silbón, the whistling spirit from legend. "All it takes is to whistle the tune," one boy said with a smirk. "If you hear him reply, you'll never live to tell the tale." Rosa, bored of their bragging, rolled her eyes. "Ghost stories?" she muttered. But as she returned home, the dare lingered in her mind. She stopped in the plaza, alone under the stars, and whistled the haunting melody she had heard as a child. At first, nothing happened, but then, faint and far off, came a reply, a perfect mimic of her whistle. Rosa turned to leave, but the faint sound of dragging chains followed her into the night. Rosa hurried home, her heart pounding, but she said nothing to Doña Marta. That night she lay in bed, the silence of the house broken only by the creak of the wooden beams. Then came a sound. Tap, 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 at her window. She froze, staring at the curtains. Slowly, the tapping stopped, but as she exhaled, thinking it was just her imagination, a low whistle drifted through the room, followed by the scrape of something heavy dragging across the ground. Rosa whispered a prayer and pulled the blanket over her head, trembling until dawn. The next morning, Doña Marta noticed Rosa's pale face. "What did you do, Niña?" she asked, her voice sharp. I whistled," Rosa admitted. Doña Marta's face darkened. "You fool! You've called him. El Silbón. He's marked you." Rosa tried to laugh it off, but when she looked down at her wrist, she saw a bruise shaped like a bony hand. Determined to prove her grandmother wrong, Rosa went to her best friend, Mateo, and told him everything. He listened, skeptical but intrigued. "Let's go back to the plaza tonight," Mateo suggested. "If this spirit is real, we'll face it together." That evening, as the moon hung high, the two ventured to the plaza. It was eerily quiet, the festive decorations from the previous day now lifeless in the wind. Mateo whistled once, challenging the legend. Nothing. He whistled again. This time, the response came swiftly, a sharp, piercing whistle that seemed to circle them, though the air was still. Rosa grabbed Mateo's arm. "Let's go!" But as they turned, they saw him, a tall, emaciated figure in a wide-brimmed hat, his skeletal frame wrapped in tattered clothing. He dragged a burlap sack behind him, its contents shifting and thumping with each step. "El Silbón," Mateo whispered, frozen. The figure stopped and pointed directly at Rosa, then slowly opened his sack, revealing bones glinting in the moonlight. Rosa screamed, and the two ran, the sound of chains and dragging footsteps pursuing them. They reached Rosa's house and bolted the door, but the whistling continued, closer now. Doña Marta stood in the center of the room clutching a rosary. "You cannot run from him," she yelled. "He takes what he is owed." "What does he want?" Rosa cried. "Regret, repentance. If he smells your guilt, he spares you. But if your heart is stubborn..." Doña Marta didn't finish. She shoved salt into Rosa's hand. "Circle yourself and pray. The whistling grew deafening, the walls of the house rattling. Rosa clutched Matteo's hand, her voice trembling as she whispered prayers. The air turned cold, and the shadow seeped under the door. Doña Marta stepped forward, her voice commanding. "This is not your home. Leave her." The shadow hesitated, then spoke in a voice like grinding stones. "She called me. She must pay." Rosa dropped to her knees, tears streaming down her cheeks. "I didn't mean to. Please, spare me." The shadow solidified into the form of El Silbón, his skeletal hand reaching toward her. But before he could touch her, Doña Marta threw a vial of holy water at his feet, causing him to recoil. "You may not take her tonight," Doña Marta growled, "but your curse will remain until it is broken." El Silbón tilted his head, his empty eye sockets staring into Rosa's soul. Then, with one final whistle, he vanished, leaving behind the stench of death and the chilling silence. Days passed, but Rosa knew he was still watching. Every night, she heard the faint whistle in the distance, a reminder of her mistake. One evening, she opened her door to find a small burlap sack on her doorstep. Inside a single bone and a note. "You can't run forever.